Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I'm AbdulWahid. Welcome to another episode of the podcast where myself and Hashil we're going to be discussing mental well-being, Islamic psychology, and other matters. There's a statement of one of the early Muslim scholars of Ilm al-Nafs, considered a pioneer in Islamic psychology, what is now become to be known, where he says that human existence cannot be healthy without the ishtibak of soul and body, without the interweaving and entangling of soul and body. And this is an important aspect that we always emphasize, which is the importance of acknowledging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as your creator, depending and relying upon Him. Today's topic, inshallah, we're going to be speaking about is going to be looking at stress, inshallah, and its effects on mental well-being as well as physical well-being as well, as we're going to come to discuss, inshallah. So let's get going. This is the second episode. Barakallahu feekum. Understanding stress. What is stress?
Barakallahu feek, Shaykh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salli wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam ajma'in. Amma ba'd. Stress, a huge topic of our time and of our era. Stress is a natural response that we have when it comes to threats or challenging situations. It could be anything. It's a mental tension. So it's pressure, what we call in Arabic, dhaght al-nafsi or dhaht al-atifi. Dhaht means pressure, it's a pressure, but it's a pressure that is psychological and is emotional, and it happens or occurs due to a threat to ourselves or a challenge that we're facing. And there are many different types. It could be how we feel at that moment due to a deadline. It could be to being late for an interview. It could be, so many different things, running a particular event, and the list goes on. But it's just how our bodies naturally feel, physically, emotionally, as well as cognitively, if I can say, how we think, our thinking process, and so on.
So there's lots. Okay, so we can speak about financial stresses, right? So, for example, not having money can be stressful, and at the same time, having money can be stressful, meaning that I don't know how to manage it, and I'm not coping, balancing. There's work pressures, for example, that you might have, deadlines and stuff like that. I think earlier you mentioned when it comes to university deadlines, that adds stress. Okay, so what's different between, or stress in relationships, health concerns? All of a sudden you've got a health issue. I had a health issue. It made me stressed out. And then, as we know, it somewhat compounds because the more stressed you are, the weaker your immune system. What makes some stresses worse than others, or chronic stress, for example, as opposed to normal stress? Because everyone's going to have stresses.
Exactly.
We know, for example, that our life anyway is going to be trials and tribulations, right? The ayah in the Quran, what is it? وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ. So there's going to be stresses and difficulties in life. So what's the difference between normal stresses and stresses which become, chronic or
long term? Subhanallah, that ayah and another ayah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions in Surah Al-Mulk, when He mentions خَلَقَنَا الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ, al-maut, life, al-maut, death, wal-hayat, and life, and what is between them, لِنَبَلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا, so that we can test you and trial you to see which of you is best in terms of dealing with them, in terms of in your amal and in your righteous deeds. Stress has different types. We talked about how, firstly, stress can be very normal. It's that normal, very acute type of stress, the very common one. Very short term, it's a short term response. It could be positive, it could be negative. It could be negative in the way it affects you, but it could be positive that it pushes you to do something about it. But what happens is that when stress starts to become continuous, when it becomes, it occurs more regularly, it becomes episodic or chronic, as you mentioned earlier, this is long term, meaning the stress is not short term, it's more long term, meaning I've been going through this stress not for a day, not for 3 days or 4 days, but maybe a week or 2 weeks, maybe even longer than that. And now it starts to have an impairment in your whole system, meaning it's impairing how you feel emotionally, impairing your thoughts, impairing your concentration, for example, and focus, and also physically. The longer that goes, the more it's just going to have, like I said, the impact it will have on your immunity, which leads to more problems, stress, then feeling very overwhelmed, low mood, depression, anxiety, very anxious, and also can have an impact on your physical health, such as all these different pains that we feel and so on. Afwan, was that the question?
Yeah, no, that's good, man. I think one of the things that we're moving on to is that how stress is often a precursor to depression and anxiety. Yeah. And I think that's where you were going there. So you have two types of stress, I guess. The one that, you have it and it goes, and one that, if it's long-term, over a period of time, that's what leads to these other conditions, basically mental health conditions like low mood and depression, anxiety, as well as physical symptoms. Which I came across something when I was reading up for this. I came across something really interesting, which was, I forgot the name of the word now. Psychosomatic. Yeah.
The somatic is the physical side.
Somatic is the physical side. Psycho is and it's how basically stress actually plays out in your physical ailments. So I think some of the things that came up would be inflammation, right? When you're stressed out, if you suffer from a condition, it becomes worse. Yeah. If you're diabetic and you have stress, your sugar levels go up. Yeah. So how stress can actually make you physically worse. Going back to the statement at the beginning of the connection between your mental and your physical well-being. So it shows that it's just important to be able to know when you're stressed and to be able to diffuse your stress as well as manage it somewhat, isn't it? Yeah. So just maybe we can touch on that a bit more about the connection between the stress and its impact physically on us. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, this is something that people need to have as a checklist, and I'll get onto that. But for physical health, how does it impact you physically? I think it's important to understand, recognize if you're struggling, when you're stressed, what happens to you physically? Just notice that for a moment. Are you struggling to breathe? So you're feeling breathlessness or shortness of breath? Are you starting to feel a bit panicky? Some people, they either get a panic attack or they just feel panicky. Some people start to have like a blurred sort of sight. You can't see things properly. Some people become very tearful. They end up crying. People say, I don't know why I'm crying. It's just a natural response to stress. You're struggling to sleep, for example, as part of stress. Fatigue. So fatigue could be, that fatigue is literally a lot of pain, feeling quite lethargic, feeling like there's this burden on you. These muscle tensions, headaches or muscle aches, chest pain, high blood pressure. We talked about high blood sugar, so that's a high glucose or what they call hyperglycemia. Indigestion or heartburn. I think you mentioned something about, that's something that can happen. You can have this issue about indigestions or having heartburns or tummy problems, constipation, diarrhea, feeling very sick, dizzy, fainting. You're starting to see the weight gain or weight loss. So there's the effect of cortisol, developing rashes and itchy skin. So you start to feel a bit itchy. You sweat a lot. There's changes in the menstrual cycle, so that can be very difficult for a lot of women. And of course, there's a lot of these existing health problems that start to get worse. Like we mentioned, if you already have a health problem, now you're going to have flare-ups, which just exacerbates the situation, and then you're in this little cycle of what am I going to do? Yeah.
So we know now it's obviously very important to be able to learn how to manage stress, because sometimes this is the thing as well. I used to think, for example, pressure, pressure, and I just don't want pressure. Right? I want a life without pressure. But I've come to realize that pressure, I can look at it like, pressure bad. I can look at it like pressure, hold on a minute. This is a chance for me to overcome and it's a challenge, right? So I can take it as a challenge, and that's just literally a change in a mindset. So for example, some of the greatest or some of the best, and this is maybe not the best analogy but I watch football, right? Well, I used to when I was younger. And you find that the job of a football manager is high pressure, especially because the stakes are high, but also that means that he has to perform more, right? So you've got some people, they see pressure as a competition to prove themselves. I can do this. Other people see pressure, oh no, I can't handle this. How much of it is a mindset? Because we need to learn to basically what I'm getting at is that fumbling, I'm getting at. How I used to see pressure before I, for example, set up Medina College and ran it, was negative. Now my mindset of pressure is actually positive, right? And I've learned to see it as a good thing that allows me to actually grow, right? Grow, basically. Let's speak about the mindset and how we can take these things which are stresses, right? and not make them distresses, make them something which is positive. How does that, what's the kind of strategies we can talk about?
It is a mindset issue, because no success for a Muslim or a non-Muslim can ever be achieved except through pressure. It goes back to the butterfly effect.
Yeah.
The butterfly the caterpillar cannot become, that little minute mesquite, creature cannot become a beautiful creature as the butterfly, more powerful, more beautiful, except that it has to go through the transformation stage, which is the cocoon. The cocoon has to, it's tight, it feels like it's going through a lot of pressure in that stage. Allahu A'lam what goes inside of it, but it has to go through that. It's something that it can't surpass. But it has to go through that phase in order for it to become greater. Using that analogy or that example is that definitely pressure is an obstacle, and it's a big barrier that people struggle to kind of deal with. And it just puts a person down from doing something. But the higher the pressure, the higher the stakes, the more likely an individual, if that individual is sincere, wants to really become great in whatever shape or form, they will have to go through pressure. قال الله تعالى أحسب الناس أن يتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا وهم لا يفتنون. You have Iman, you're now a Muslim, you're now a practicing Muslim, or you want to take your deen more seriously, you want to learn the deen of Allah, you want to seek knowledge, you want to become better. You're going to have to be tested. Allah has to test you, in order for Allah to put you up to the ranks, any one of us, we have to be tested. Trials and tribulations have to come. There will be certain pressures. But why is that the case? It's just, that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises us. And it's not just us. وَلَقَدْ فَتَنَّ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ Those before you, way before you, were tried and tested as well. Why? فَلِيَعْلَمَنَّ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ صَدَقُوا وَلِيَعْلَمَنَّ الْكَاذِبِينَ. Allah already knows who believes and who might not believe, but it's to test who's truthful, who has the sidq and the actual, who's truthful in what they claim, and those who are not as truthful. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. But the idea is that if you really want to move forward, it is a mindset issue. And I think the example you gave about the football coach, the manager, it is high stakes. And I think it's good to understand that everybody has to work and outperform. But yes, it's definitely true that the pressure will be a barrier to many people, and then they question, should I do it, should I not? And it's a big problem.
Yeah. Well, just someone that's, for example, already got conditions, say somebody's, they themselves suffer from anxiety or low mood, would you then say, well, if there's a stress situation or pressure situation, don't put yourself in it because it's going to make your anxiety worse? Or would you say, no, this is part of your therapy, for example, and I think, what we forgot to do, and I'm going to cut mid for you to do it as well, just in case someone's just joining us, they haven't seen the first episode, you have to introduce yourself again.
No, that's all right.
What's your background?
No, my background, la haraj. Again, my background is, I'm a psychological wellbeing practitioner, so I'm a low intensity CBT practitioner or therapist, and I'm a wellbeing coach, and I work in the field of mental health and wellbeing. And my main aim is that I use CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, and motivation interviewing to help people to evoke behavior changes to become the better self, to help them become a better version of themselves now.
Yeah. So the question now was, if you had someone that came to you, they've got anxiety, and now they're going to present to you a situation, which is there's a pressure situation in front of them, a high stress situation in front of them. Would you say, okay, because you know that stresses make you more anxious, or stresses make you more, can affect your mood, don't do it? Would you say do it? And that would be part of the therapy, right? Part of actually, becoming resilient to stress and pressure, for example. Yeah.
They have to learn how to manage it. If it's like an anxiety, I would teach them how to manage those anxiety better. First, by understanding, what are you worried about? What's the situation that's worrying you? What are your worries? And understanding what are the type of worries. If I can give a very quick example. So for example, worries are mainly two types. Worries can be either practical, I can do something about them, or worries are hypothetical, very future-based, what if, a lot of what ifs around them, but I can't do anything about them. I can't solve them, I can't seek a solution. There are also worries that can become more unhelpful. These are more like negative thoughts, but these are the main two to start with. If they're practical, we need to learn how to problem solve them. And some people are already kind of have that problem-solving mindset, they have that behavior, they do tend to problem-solve a lot. But then a lot of anxieties deal with the uncertainty and the fear of the future, that lack of clarity, the uncertainty, very hypothetical. I don't know what the future will come. So how do you manage that? And another way of also tackling anxiety is doing something called exposure work. So doing things at a graded exposure, so exposing yourself to something but in a very graded manner, so that you start to build both comfort and confidence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's, I came across when I was reading up as well, something about this type of therapy, exposure. So all you would know was a podcast I was listening to. The guy said, look, he was afraid of spiders. So what he did was he'd have a spider in a jar next to his bed. And every morning he woke up, he'd see a spider. So over time, he obviously removed his fear of spiders just by exposing himself to seeing spiders on a regular basis. So that basically speaks to what you said. And also as well, there's this, the importance of acceptance, I think. When we speak about, for example, this is, I guess, after an action has happened. So you're in a situation, a trial, for example, how do you respond so it doesn't put you in a downward spiral, for example, make you feel, what's the ways in which you can respond? Looking at, for example, the Quran, looking at the Sunnah, what are some of the ways in which a person can respond to stresses from an Islamic perspective?
It's reminding yourself that you're always going to be tested.
Yeah.
Reminding yourself that whatever came upon you is a test. It's a test. It's that reminds. Sometimes we forget, and that's normal. We can forget that we're being tested. But if we try our best to kind of learn and remind ourselves that we're being tested, that life's a test. Just reminding ourselves life's filled with different sorts of tests.
Yeah.
And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even the hadith sometimes can be a good affirmation. عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ. It's amazing. The affairs of the believer are absolutely amazing. إِنَّ أَمْرَهُ كُلَّهُ خَيْرٌ. That his affairs are all good. إِنْ أَصَابَتُ السَّرَاء شَكَرْ فَكَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُ. If good were to come to him, he's grateful. They're grateful, and that is good for them. And if any sort of trial or misfortune were to come to them, when أصابت الضراء صبر فكان خيرا له. And if any sort of mishap or any trial were to occur, they're patient, and that is better for them. وَلَيْسَ ذَلِكَ إِلَّا لِلْمُؤْمِنِ. And you only find that with the believer. What is that saying? Only the believers, i.e. those who have iman and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who know that Allah is testing them and understand that this is good that's come to me, I need to be grateful, and then this is a trial, I need to be patient. They are the ones who the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, لَيْسَ ذَلِكَ إِلَّا لِلْمُؤْمِنِ. It's only the believer. You won't really find that with the non-Muslims, because for them they'll either start complaining and they'll start saying the wrong, start cursing and so on and so forth. They'll go wild just because of a situation. Sheikh, I'll give you a very, very good example. A bus goes on diversion. So many buses go on diversion, especially when it comes on the weekend. And it's natural that we can fall into this sometimes. It's happened to me, subhanAllah, yesterday. And I even asked myself, I didn't really complain, but I was wondering, why are these guys always on diversion? But I understood, okay.
Also today as well, just to cut you in. Today you had the diversion.
Today was a bit of a diversion. Yesterday there was another diversion. But then, I was like, why do these buses always have a diversion? But subhanAllah, I forgot. First of all, it's a weekend. Second of all, they already, TFL already they already send an email to people on Thursday evening or Friday that this is there's going to be, just to inform the people what's going to happen throughout the weekend for traveling. Also, it's realizing that qadar Allah, there might be some khair in it. When I realized that diversion was for a good reason because they're doing some construction work, you realize, why did I complain? But it's to realize that qadar Allah, be a bit patient with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ, he mentions in the hadith, وَالصَّلَاةُ نُور وَالصَّدَقَةُ بُرْهَانٌ وَالصَّبْرُ ضِيَاءٌ. He says, as-salah nur, salah is light, was-sadaqatu burhan, sadaqah is proof, as-sidq bil-iman, so proof of your iman, was-sabru diya, sabr is diya, bima'ana, it's illumination, it's illuminating, it's another form of light and brightness. It's just something that we need to kind of work on. It's the example I gave you about the book Learned Optimism, which was written by Dr. Martin Seligman, who's the founder of positive psychology. What he's saying is that we need to develop an attitude, it's a concept to develop an attitude and a behavior and a habit of how can we look at the positivity in every given situation. This was said when? In the late 90s. This is when he came up with it. Late 90s, early 2000s. A great book and a great area. But the Prophet ﷺ said this many, many, many moons ago on how we can deal with difficult situations.
That's the topic of optimism. But even before that, what you spoke about is patience and contentment with divine decree, basically. And this goes back even to the beginning where we said that. And it's ajabli amri mu'min, a believer, right? Because he understands his nafs, his soul, his ruh, his qalb, as well as he understands the physical aspects of. So there's that ishtibak, obviously we mentioned at the beginning, between the soul and the body, and that brings up general well-being, is holistic, right? As opposed to, for example, a type of therapy or type of outlook and mindset that only focuses on the material and doesn't understand the nafs or the soul as well, and its role in well-being and stuff like that. But definitely, I think that's really, really important to remember that everything that happens by the qadr of Allah, and we should be patient firstly, and then contentment comes after patience. But all of them is rewarded. All of them is rewardable. But again, it changes the mindset. It changes it from something which is negative to something which is positive. What else do you think is there in terms of, like, let's say, practical strategies for managing stress? So, like you mentioned, you touched on the issue of positive thinking and reframing, right? So instead of having a thought like, why me? This always happens to me, right? Oh, it's always me that this happens to. Kind of like negative, looking at it in a different way by saying, okay, this isn't difficult. Allah is going to help me overcome this. Tawakkal ala Allah, right? What practical strategies are there for stress management? Because we know, for example, that stress is harmful. It can be harmful if it's long term. It can physically, mentally drain you, right? Make you tired, fatigued, make you low mood, anxiety. What can we do to not let it get that far, basically? What strategies have you come across?
One thing I wanted to add was, in terms of an ayah, as an affirmation. A lot of these ayat can be affirmations to us, just to help us to cope. They're like coping strategies. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah will not burden a soul more than it can bear. Sometimes we feel like it's unbearable, which is understandable. This is how we feel. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will not put you in a position where you can't bear with it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لا يظلم العباد. He does not oppress His slaves and servant. He will not put something that's beyond your capability. So it's knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will not put you in a situation where basically Allah will not leave you to rot, in short. A couple of things, couple of strategies. Problem solving. I think it's important to learn how to problem solve something. So we have something called the 7 to 8 steps. So it works in this way. Number 1, identify what is the problem. And then after that, if it's a worry, for example, okay, what is the worry? Let's turn that into now a problem. What is the problem around that? Then we look at solutions. Think of any solution, no matter how trivial, mundane, how silly it may sound, or you might think it may be to be, just put it down. These are my solutions, 1, 2, 3. For each solution, let's weigh the pros and cons. What's the strength? What's the weakness? What's the advantages and disadvantages, and so on and so forth. After you've done that little breakdown, what is the best solution? So maybe you've got like a set plan from those solutions. It's like, I'll do it in, some people do it as, I'll do step 1, 2, 3, not a problem, but choose one particular, the best one you feel to work, and then give that a go. Just work on it. If it works, alhamdulillah. And if it doesn't work, try another one. So problem solving helps. Another one is letting go. And letting go, how we work on this is, part of it is acceptance. Part of it is trying to be more focused on the present moment. And letting go is basically, if I can't do anything about it, the thing that I'm stressing about, the thing that I'm worrying about, two things. I always like to do this. I say this to people, especially to the Muslims. Islamic perspective, non-Islamic perspective. Non-Islamic perspective, what does it say? Letting go means if I can't deal with it, then there's no point worrying. Let me focus on what I can control, what I can do at this moment. As for what is out of my control and what is out of my ability or capability of getting sorted, if I can't, then I need to just put it aside. I need to stop worrying. The Islamic response, وَأُفَوِّضُ أَمْرِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. You do what you can and then you leave it the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I gave this example to one particular brother, I said, when Fir'aun was after Musa and Bani Israel, and they had reached to the nahar, they had reached to the river, and they were worried. What did they say? Inna lamudrakun, we're gone, that's it, he's on our tail, Fir'aun is on our tail, right behind us. What did Musa say? Kalla, no, that's an affirmative no. Bal ma'iya rabbi sayahdeen, Allah is with me, He will show me a way out of this. And we know the story. He went, he did his part, and Allah split the two seas. That is you leaving it with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I mentioned in one of my recent, I think you probably saw it on Instagram, and I said, a mother said to her child, do your best and let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do the rest. That's how we need to work on it. Whatever is out of our control, leave it with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't know if you want me to mention, there are a couple of other ones.
Yeah. So that's the acceptance basically. You accept the situation as it is, and then what you can change, you act basically, right? You're in the present, you accept the situation like you mentioned, and then whatever you can do, you can do. What you can't do is outside of your hands. There's no, I guess, huge benefit in worrying about it as well. And that's, I think what's really important is the aspect of the prayer as well, as a way of kind of being in the moment, being in the present, right? So now you're gonna, for example, offer salat, for example, because we know the Messenger of Allah say, Ya Bilal, arkhni bis salat, or arkhna bis salat, give us tranquility with prayer, right? So it's almost like a time to kind of get back in the present. And obviously, like you said, there's a non-Muslim way, there's a Muslim way. So non-Muslims, they'll speak about, mindfulness and meditation yoga, and deep breathing and stuff like that. But for us, we have the salat, which is a moment away anyway. It's never going to be less than 5 minutes of that type of contemplation and reflection. Even the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, before revelation, used to go off to the cave of Hira for, So there's that kind of, grounding and, getting that kind of relaxation, which is important, obviously, because when you're stressed, sometimes you're think too fast. You need to, what's the word? You need to kind of
de-stress.
Yeah, you need to de-stress basically, and the prayer is there for that as well.
They also mentioned, subhanAllah, just on my way here, I was just listening to the tafsir of the ayah, وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ وَإِنَّهَا لَكَبِيرَةٌ إِلَّا لَخَاشِعِينَ. I was listening to Ibn Uthaymeen's sharh. It was like a 22-minute video, and I was just listening to it, and it's a lot of benefits, subhanAllah, and he was talking about either the Prophet ﷺ, إِذَا اشْتَدَّ فِي الْأَمْرِ فَزِعَ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ. So if he's worried, concerned about something that's concerning him, he would go straight to salah, showing that al-isti'ana, through, just seeking Allah's help and aid through salah and patience. وَإِنَّهَا لَكَبِيرَةٌ, as Dhahak mentions in his tafsir, يعني kabira, it's big, it's heavy, ثقيلة, إِلَّا عَلَى الْخَاشِعِينَ, except those who have the khushu'. And he was mentioning, rahmatullah, about how what you're seeing is just you're just seeing someone praying physically, but where is the khushu'? Where is the khushu'? Khushu' is what's going to give you that tranquility, as you said, arihna bis salah ya Bilal, or aqim as salah arihna. That where do you get that tranquility? Is from the khushu', and that's something that when you pray and you feel that khushu', the person who hasn't prayed for a long time, but the moment they start praying, they feel completely different. Yeah. These non-Muslims, sometimes they're looking at us at work, they're thinking, they understand that we pray, but they're thinking, where do you get you go for that 5-minute, break, and a lot of them are looking for that tranquility. And subhanAllah, sometimes from salah, that probably is one of the means probably for them to come closer to the deen. But that is something that really helps us to kind of, as you said, a de-stressor. Yeah. Just min humum ad-dunya, from all the concerns and all the stresses of life, it's a moment to just focus on your relationship with Allah.
It's that disassociation from the problems of the moment, and it's almost like a disassociation from materialism and from the world around you, so that you can actually focus on. And then there's dua in there that you're going to be asking Allah, and it's ajib. It is so amazing that, it's just how it is in many cases. The solutions to the problems, answers to the stresses, or the solutions to the stresses, answers to problems, a lot of times they come when you're in that moment where you're focused only on your salah, or on dua, or on recitation of Quran, right? So I find, for example, even, maybe in a morning routine, say for example, I have a morning routine. Morning routine is obviously, okay, I'm going to think about what my tasks are for the day. I'm going to plan what I'm going to get done. What's the priority task? What's the other task? I'm going to have a list and stuff like that. But if I've done that and if I haven't read Quran, I haven't, for example, spent some time with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just reading and contemplating, I find that those tasks seem to be, I don't have the answers to them. But for example, this is just myself personally. If I've read Quran or I'm reciting Quran, I'm reading Quran, having a moment, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 15 minutes, I find not just do I get the reward of reciting Quran, but also I've now got a more, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but I've now got a clear vision of how my day's going to be afterwards. See what I'm saying? It's just it's one of those things. It's about the importance of actually, I don't know how it works, but again, it's that connection where there's no kind of success without that interweaving between your spiritual side or your nafs as well as your physical side, right? You can't just, if I try to just focus on solving my problems without connecting back to the book of Allah, to Salah, you're going to find there's always a big gap, right, that can't be filled.
Afwan, if I can add, Sheikh, you know the hadith, Burika ummati bibukuriha, what was it?
Barakat al-ummat, the barakah of my ummah is in the morning. Yeah.
There's a famous book, you may have heard of it, it's called the 5 a.m. Club.
Yeah.
And when this sort of, I don't know, the narrative came about, 5 a.m., people get up 5 a.m. to meditate or they start to exercise. They do all of this stuff. It's understandable in order for them to have a productive day. Khair inshallah. But again, it comes back to what they're missing, which is ibadatillah. They're missing that part.
Yeah.
They're missing the ubudiyyah. And that's why Tawheed is, coming back to Tawheed, if I can, as a Muslim, that when it comes to managing our mental health, our stresses, it's coming back to Tawheed, going back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What was, Musa, when he was told to go to Fir'aun, he was worried, going to face someone big. فَقَالَ رَبِّ اشْرَحْ لِي صَدْرِي. He made the dua, رَبِّ اشْرَحْ لِي صَدْرِي. Open my heart, open my chest, وَيَسِّرْ لِي أَمْرِي, and make it easy for me. وَحْلُلْ عُقْدَةً مِنْ لِسَانِي يَفْقَهُوا قَوْلِي, because as they, I think as some of the Mufassirin mentioned that he had, I don't know if he had stuttering or something, he had I think trouble when it comes to public speaking, but it's to asking Allah to ease his affairs. Asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to ease affairs. There's a dua, Allahumma la sahla illa ma ja'altu sahla. There's no ease except what you make easy. Goes back to Tawheed. Goes back to returning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this easy for you. So if a person now is dealing with different types of stresses, return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and return it through salah and patience. Salah, they say that in marriage, let them come together with qiyam al-layl. When you're going through an issue like the Prophet ﷺ, it shows you he's human. Bashira wa nadhira, he's a human being just like us. So he went through problems, but he rushed to salah. Salah is a way to allow us to de-stress, but also to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah. So, and there's that other dua which, inshallah, which is, I think, one of the main du'as you'll come across. I'm looking up du'as for different situations sometimes. So there's du'a for stress and anxiety. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-ham wal-huzn wal-hazan wal-ajaz and the rest of the du'a. Asking Allah and that's part of the prayer. Part of the prayer is du'a and calling upon Allah for your actions and for your words as well. And the du'a. So you're either way, you're in a good situation when you're praying, right? Yeah. There's another aspect, a practical strategy for stress management, which is not dealing with it on your own by yourself. Actually getting community or getting support of those that are your friends or family members, for example. That's something which is, I think, important, because usually when you share a problem, you're halfway to a solution. Two minds are better than one.
That's true.
And there's no need when you carry it by yourself. It seems, but do we have a problem doing that? Do we not want to share our stresses? What's the issue there?
The issue,
as men specifically.
We just finished November yesterday. The Movember, as a term. What was I going to say? Is
the suicide rates amongst men are higher than women from what I've heard and stuff like that, right?
There are differences, but there are some studies that have shown in some parts of the world, yes, yes, men are higher than women, especially nowadays. And when it comes to seeking support, just talking it out to someone, there is that misconception. We were talking about it earlier. There's this misconception that just deal with it, don't have to talk to anyone, just move on, deal with it, and that's it. That's counterproductive, unfortunately, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's instructed the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ, counsel, seek counsel with the Sahaba. If you're a married individual, speak to your partner, your wife or your husband, speak to them, about a decision you're about to make or something that's bothering you. You can't carry it on your own, because carrying it on your own, it's just going to worsen. As I said, it's counterproductive. There is no shame, there is no harm with speaking to someone. But when you speak to someone who you can trust. Someone who you can trust that firstly can keep it as a secret. They're not going to share it to the whole world. Secondly, someone who's not going to judge you or criticize you. Someone who will, inshallah, lend you an ear and try to understand. This is why I really encourage people to learn to have a little bit of empathy for your siblings, for your friends, people around you, for your parents, and parents also for their children. Learn to have a little bit of empathy. Try to imagine what it's like to be in their situation, and go to professionals. There's nothing wrong with that. You go to your GP if you're having a physical problem. If you're having an emotional problem, there's nothing wrong with going to a therapist or a psychiatrist, or even speak to your GP and letting them know, I'm going through these problems. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. The services are available, the access is available. But I think, especially as men, men generally, it's because of that masculinity that we have, that probably it's more of a cultural thing, a worldwide culture, that if I talk about my problems, it means I am, not as masculine. I'm a bit feminine, or I'm a wimp, or I'm the list goes on. Yeah,
there's so many times you say, "Oh, how you doing?" The person says, "I'm fine," but you know that you can tell they're not fine, but they just don't. They think by saying how they really feel, they're complaining, right? If they say how it feels like they're complaining, they don't want to be complaining, or they don't want to be a burden for somebody else, right? But that's also. The thing is, I think what was one of the things that bring a lot of people to Islam as well is that community and that brotherhood. Because naturally, there's this thing called affiliative drive that I came across when I was reading up on this, right? Which is the innate human motivation for social bonds and relationships. And I think one thing that slowly got lost in Western society is two important bonds and relationships. They were no longer nurtured or cultivated, which is brotherhood, right, and family, right? So it became the nuclear family. It's you, your wife, and your kids, right? And that's it. There isn't a strong connection to the rest of your family in many cases, let alone to the lads, right? You get married and you start your family, that's it. You're no longer with the brothers anymore. But Islam doesn't make that separation, right? You still have that brother, because sometimes you've got your wife, right, and your kids, but you need other men that you can speak to, that you can go out with, that you can do things with. You need that bond, right? Which is why you have the إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةً, that the Muslims are brothers, right? So I think it's really important in terms of, and which is what you mentioned, that we utilize the community as well, because you don't have to be stressed by yourself. If you're with other people, you're not by yourself. You're no longer as stressed, right? You've got that community that you're helping.
There's two types of societies. There's the collectivist society and the individualistic society. And you'll find that with the collectivist society, or those societies, it's both societies experience stresses, but in the way they manage it differs. Those who manage it on the collectivist side, a lot of them, they tend to manage it well because they have people around them that they can talk, consult, and seek help and advice. They're not dealing with it on their own. Whereas in the individualistic societies, like here for example, that's no longer there. It's been stripped away from them, or that's faded away. Hence why a lot of people feel lonely. Yeah. Lonely in a sense where I don't have people I can go to. Look how dispersed the family and how broken down the family structures are over here. People are not talking to their mums and dads or siblings, and who can they go to for help? Yeah. So they turn to other things for help. So because they don't have that, and that's why even if I may, Yani, just to give an example, during COVID, it was already mentioned that a lot of the West were experiencing higher rates of loneliness compared to those in all the different collectivist societies in the eastern parts of the world.
Yeah.
So it's important. That's why that social network is vital and crucial. And it shows that there's nothing wrong. You need to have that bond with people, brothers, sisters, even if they're married, you have a community, you have the community here, you have a network that you can reach out to, talk to people. If you don't talk, people won't know your problem. Yeah. How can you then seek for solutions? Yes, you can seek, yani you can, obviously, yes, the ayah, Inni ashku bathi wa huzni in Allah, I complain, and I complain about my sorrows and my problems to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there's nothing wrong with consulting with other people. You need that help. Yeah.
I think one of the things we can, look at in terms of moving towards a conclusion. So we've looked at, for example, stress and its negative impacts on a person's health. We've looked at, for example, ways in which what Islam says about acceptance and accepting the situation, being patient, for example, knowing that it's qadr Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then practical ways in which you can deal with stress or manage stress so it doesn't become chronic, because that's the aim, is to not let it become chronic stress, so that it becomes
manageable.
It's manageable, basically. But also, as community members that see other people that are stressed, Islam also tells us to help to alleviate, right, the stresses and the hardships of somebody else. So even before they ask, as a community, we're aware of each other. We know what's going. We know, okay, that person's got a financial difficulty. We know that it can have a negative impact on their mental health. Let's help alleviate it, for example, and so on and so forth. That's also there in terms of, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه, right? It doesn't believe until you love your brother, you love yourself. وأنا في عون العبد ما كان العبد في عون أخيه, as is in the Hadith Qudsi. I'm in the assistance of my worshipper so long as my worship is in the assistance of his brother. And the Hadith that, the Qudsi as well, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions about, if you visited your brother, you would have found me there, meaning, So there's so many that point to that collective that you just mentioned as well. That's important. But I wanted to touch a little bit more on therapy before we conclude, because therapy is something, again, which is a bit of a kind of, I think it's a hit and a miss, in the sense that, people don't go because they say, what's the point? And I'd encourage them to go, even if it's just to be able to communicate with somebody. Because I think firstly, you should really communicate with family members or friends that are close. They know you, right? They're able to help you. You shouldn't manage it by yourself. But some people, they don't get the outcome they want, or they're unable to do that for whatever reason. They don't want to expose something that's causing them trauma. Here's where therapy really can help, isn't it? Does it have to be Muslim therapist or not? Number one. Number two is, what's the best way to do that?
I think I like what you said. I think start with family and close people, your close circles. I think start with family and close circles, because they're the ones who know you, and they're the ones you're more likely to share. So I would even do it in a graded manner if I could do it. So just start with the ones who are closest to you. Start one bit at a time. Muslim or non-Muslim obviously is more recommended. If it's a Muslim, especially someone who can share and understand that cultural competency, they naturally share that Islamic worldview. They have an understanding that you can relate things back to the deen. So it's more recommended as a Muslim. But if not, obviously you've got others. Still go for it, inshallah. In terms of tools, one of the best in terms of therapy, like I would definitely. Are we still talking about stress, right?
Yeah, so, stress.
For example, stress. I've got 3 different tools. One of the top tools is the stress bucket, which a lot of my seniors as well highly recommend. This is generally something that is highly recommended. What the stress bucket is that stress is like water being filled into a bucket. The bucket then becomes heavy, reaches to the top. How can we now make it lighter? It's difficult to even carry at times. So you're overwhelmed. It's about poking little holes at the bottom. So one thing it says is that people look for unhealthy coping behaviors. So people go on to things that are not really helpful, such as, people go into alcohol, smoking, and other things that short term, but it doesn't really relieve the stress in the long term. As healthy coping mechanisms, so these little holes that are poked at the bottom, they're literally the things that can help you, such as relaxation, better time management, spending time with family, spending time with, let's say, visiting people, wherever it may be. Salah can be put there for Muslims. It could be recitation of the Quran. You could put so many things. The more holes poked at the bottom, the more likely that water is going to filter out. It's going to start draining outside, draining out of that bucket. So as more water is being filled in, more stresses in life, you feel that it is manageable because it's not going to be as heavy as it was before. So that needs a lot of practice, but a lot of people too benefit from that. There's another two that I've something I'm working on introducing. One is called the washing machine. The washing machine, say end of the week, we throw everything into the washing machine for laundry. You can tell the washing machine either will not start or it's going to have problems if it does start because it's overloaded. So what I'd recommend here is 5 things. Just put in the top. This is where prioritization happens. Part of stress is that we're not prioritizing things. We're overwhelmed. We're overloaded with things. So just stick to 5 important things you can put in. Another is a shopping list. If you're going to go shopping, if you have a long list, you're going to be a bit overwhelmed. Just stick to what's really, really important. So why I'm using these is just, why don't we try prioritizing the things that we're doing. This comes back to actually my journal that I think I told you about earlier on. One of the things I have, so some people know that I'm working with, I have a mental health or my well-being journal that inshallah will be soon available online. In that journal, what I use is I call a balance. Balancing every single day, you're balancing 3 things: a routine, a pleasurable, and a necessary task. Routine, what I do on a regular basis. Pleasurable, the things I love, enjoy doing, things I find pleasurable. And necessary, these are the important tasks or essentials. If I don't do them, there's going to be a negative consequence. So what I do every single day is, in that journal, is you select one of each. So that if you do one of each, you're finding a balance. But you get to choose what is the most important routine for that day, what's the most important pleasurable for that day, what's the most important necessary for that day. I think I did it with one brother, and he was like, a routine, I think, was routine, my word of Quran, whatever that may be. A pleasurable, meeting up with brothers. And then I think the necessary was, making sure I wake up making sure I pray my salawat on time, or making sure I pray Fajr in the masjid, or if it's on a Jummah, make sure I attend Salat al Jummah. So there you go. That's an example of how you can do it. And that really helps you to find a certain level of balance. And if you're finding that balance, then inshallah, you'll manage, inshallah, to distress yourself.
MashaAllah. I was going to have a conclusion, but I think that's a nice conclusion for the episode on stress, basically, and understanding stress and practical tips to manage stress. You've actually concluded with that. And I think one of the important parts, or I think for me the important thing, is to understand that stresses are normal. It's, and it's not something which is la yukallifu Allahu nafsan illa wus'aha. Allah doesn't burden a person more than they can bear. So it's never too much. So you should have a positive mindset in addressing stresses and see it as an opportunity for you to become a better person and to develop, rather than as something that is a harm for you as well, for example. And a lot of it's, I think, mindset is really important. But one of the things, when will your journal come out? Until it does come out, I recently got myself a journal. It's not mine, I'm not profiting from it. But I think it's important to have a journal, have it on your desk or next to your bed or wherever you're going to be, and just to write in it daily. It doesn't have to be, I don't think when you're writing in the journal daily, it doesn't necessarily have to be a whole page. It doesn't have to be an actual journal entry. It could be, a list of things that I did today and I want to do tomorrow. It could be a task list, for example.
Exactly.
You just have to basically write every day, because there's something about putting pen to paper and getting something out of your head that's not captured when you're using an iPad. So digitally, it's not the same, right? Even though you might have a pen and a digital paper, there's something about a pen and a paper. So I think also until your mood journal actually, when's it coming out? When can we get hold of it? End of this month, end of December.
Inshallah. Either end of December or early December, beginning January. Inshallah.
Hopefully it's end of December, so we got it in time for as they say, the new year, not as they say. But in any case, anyway, inshallah, until then, you can still get yourself a notebook and do some journaling, I think, is really important.
Quantity is about it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. So it's not about the quantity, how much you have to write. That's up to you. It's not. There's no set limit. It's the quality, meaning it's what you put down. Put whatever you can put.
Yeah, that's the important thing. Just get used to doing it on a daily basis, and you'll see it. I mean, it's such a tool which is underused today, unfortunately, and I think it's really has an impact. It's helped me a lot as well myself, especially when you go back and you can, 6 months down, you read back what you wrote 6 months ago. You can see development that way. Do you see what I mean? And it's something that scholars did from the past to present as well. Jazakallah khair, barakallahu fikum.
Jazakallah khair.
Inshallah, the next one, inshallah, what we're going to speak about. Do we know yet, or?
It'd be nice to it'd be nice to think about the next one. Maybe we should think about. Maybe we'll surprise them.
Okay, I see.
We'll surprise the audience, inshallah.
Barakallahu fikum wa jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam.